Hello.
Hello.
Welcome into a podcast about basketball.
After hours, apparently.
Hello, ladies. This is all the hoop talk you can handle. Well, some of it you can handle.
It's all the hoop talk you want to handle, really. I mean,
It's actually more. It's more
no,
than you
no
want.
one wants any more than this.
No. Even this is a little much. To be fair. Basketball by association. Me be Arky. He be Joel. Hello, Joel.
Hey, it's good to be back. We had a little weekend hiatus and a lot of basketball in between that. So I'm excited. Let's do the bite. We only have so much time in this world and only so much time in this segment. Let's bite away.
Well, let's by the way, as we get ready to celebrate the 4th of July this weekend, We're not used to having basketball still going and still in the conference finals. So,
you know what? I hadn't thought of that. And that is so true. How weird. How weird. It doesn't feel abnormal to me, but yeah, how weird.
Yeah. Well, because you and I like basketball. So if it's on, we're just going to enjoy it. If it's going till November and then you start the next season on Christmas date, that's cool by me. Just keep playing. I don't care about all these injuries. Speaking of injuries, Joel, Giannis hyperextends his left leg in the third quarter against the Hawks, who were already without Shea Young, who is out or was out last night as we're speaking. And those are just two of the most recent injury news items we can bring on too. I do want to get to specifically to that game. But Joel, let me just throw out some names. You tell me if these dudes have been important at all and if it's been one of those type of years, especially in just the playoffs. Are you ready to go?
Let's do it.
Shea Young, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kawhi Leonard, Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, LeBron. Anybody forget about LeBron? James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis.
You said Anthony Davis already, but Kevin Durant comes next. Yeah.
Kevin Durant. Damage Kyrie Irving, whatever.
Yep.
So
Jamal Murray.
Arguably, you can go down and just say who are the top superstars in the league and just go, he's been out. Literally almost down the line.
You just built a fantastic 2K All-Star team is what you just did there.
Are you kidding me? That fantasy team would score 200 every game, and I'd be all right with that. Joel, this playoffs is marred possibly in some people's minds by the fact that there have been so many injuries, and it's been sort of discussed that this may be the season that people need to talk about an asterisk being on the quote-unquote championship. Stan Van Gundy says no, because he responded to a tweet about that actually, and I think I want to get your opinion on it. I think you'll like it. Nope, no asterisks, just champions. And he also went on to talk about how the Lakers from last year and this year, with whoever wins out of these four teams, it's whoever sort of survived the storm the best. But it's hard to argue injuries haven't been a ginormous reason why these are the four teams that are left.
It is one of the dirty little not secrets in the NBA that...
By the way, sorry, 3 of those injuries are to teams who are still playing right now.
Right. Yep. It is one of the secrets that health throughout a season is a key ingredient for an NBA championship. And it seems so obvious, but when you go back and you look at past champions, it's a story over and over and over again. The difference, I think, is that a lot of those injuries oftentimes occur during the regular season, it has seemed more like. And so the team that got derailed by a superstar going down with an ACL, a torn Achilles, whatever it is, they never even made it into that far of the playoffs. And so you weren't really aware of it beyond it was a footnote like, hey, that team was supposed to be really good and they weren't because that guy was hurt. And I think more of these catastrophic injuries or nagging injuries have been coming on during the playoffs. Memories are short. Our attention spans are short. So it always seems, I think every single year I see Bleacher Report run some sort of article like 2.5 months into the season, like, our injuries at the worst they've ever been, and they rattle off this huge list of stars, and it's like, yeah, that happens every year. But there is something to be said. I mean, these playoffs have been brutal. It's been a lot of not only injuries that have taken a guy out for good, we've had some of those, but it's been the nagging injuries where a guy is in the lineup and then out of the lineup and then back and forth. And you do have to wonder a little bit whether that's just kind of a change in the times, whether some of these are injuries that guys back in the day would have played on and played through. And you can call that soft or whatever, but then you look at guys like Kevin McHale, who essentially ended his career because he played through an injury he shouldn't have. And you look at all the money that's invested in the player by the team and that the player has riding on their own career. And suddenly it becomes a little bit more of just a toughness question. Yeah. And you go, it's an investment question, and you protect your investment for as long as you can.
No, but I do think that with all of that being said, it is going to be difficult for me to conjure up anytime a postseason has been this flooded with major injuries to
I don't disagree with
players.
that. Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
It has just been wild. And listen, take nothing away from Phoenix if they win, or Milwaukee, or Atlanta, or LA. It's just been a wild postseason when it comes to injuries, and someone eventually is going to be the benefactor of this, and there will be no more bodies to throw up on the floor because there will finally be the end of the season at some point. And
honestly, like, find me an NBA team from this season, and I guess I would challenge a listener to do this if you really want a homework project. Like, find me a team from this NBA season that stayed pretty much healthy the whole way through and was bad, because I don't think that exists. I think this all shakes out in the end. Like, everybody, whether you're the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Knicks, I'm heading up the ladder here, the Spurs, you get to the Blazers, whoever it was, and then now, everybody like had their big injury issues throughout the year. They had that key guy or multiple ones that they were waiting on to get back, and then somebody got back and somebody else got hurt, or somebody was in the lineup for 5 games. Like, I do think there is something to be said that it all evens out. The good teams still rise to the top because they face the same challenges that the bad teams did too.
Yeah, or some, dealt with a lot of the COVID protocol, especially the first half of the season. So, let's move on to the games, if we shall. Let's go specifically to the Hawks and the Bucks. The Bucks, I don't think are really expecting what Lou Williams was going to bring to that game because they got hit in the mouth early and often, and I think the Bucks may have rested a little bit on thinking they were going to be able to handle Atlanta without Trae Young, because they were flat early, and then they lost Giannis in the third quarter, and that clearly didn't help, even though they were already down at that point. Joel, they split at home. Both teams have. It's 2-2. This series has been, well, I guess it's been a lot since we've last spoken about this series. Milwaukee seems like the team that doesn't want to take advantage of all the situations and opportunities that they're getting. And Atlanta is just fighting like hell to stay in it. And there's only possibly 3 games left in this series, and mess around and find out Atlanta about to be about that life.
You said it incredibly well. Chuck and Shaq said it incredibly well yesterday on the broadcast. Milwaukee's lack of killer instinct showed once again. You and I harped on it endlessly during the Brooklyn Nets series about how the Bucks did not deserve to win that series. They just happened to be a better, healthier team, and they lucked into it and did just enough to be able to take advantage of it. And yeah, I've been talking throughout this playoffs and really this whole season about lost opportunities, about how you needed to bank wins early, and if you didn't, it could come back to bite you. The Lakers didn't do that. It came back to bite them. The Bucks, they needed to bank games early in this series. Why? Not because they knew Giannis was going to get hurt, but because you don't know that he's not going to get hurt either.
Right. At this point, you have to assume he is, because everyone's getting hurt.
Right.
So just
that's fair. That's fair. Like, so game 1, they lose a really close nail biter that they had no business losing. And then they waltz into this game here, a game 4 with no Trae Young. And you're right, our lackadaisical The Hawks are at home. They played to the crowd. You saw that feisty defense that Atlanta has not thrown out all the time, but they've thrown it out enough that you got to know it's part of their DNA. Like, they get after it, and they hung around this way with the Sixers too. Like, you can't always put your finger on it because it's not really a scheme. It's more of an attitude that Atlanta just fights and claws on the defensive end. And then they're weaponized enough, whether it's Trae Young or not, to get out on the run and really spread you out when you don't have your defense set, and they move the ball well. They knock down their threes. You know, Bogdan Bogdanovic had a really nice game. They needed that from him. Lou Will had a great game. Danilo Gallinari had a couple of really nice stretches for them playing to the crowd, and Kevin Huerter had a big game again too. So those are all weapons that we've talked about before. And the fact that Milwaukee did not even remotely take care of business in the first quarter, much less the second quarter, meant that when Giannis gets hurt, they're already down with a hill to climb, with an opponent that is jacked up on the crowd and vice versa. And they just fed off that. And you saw Atlanta have a killer instinct, right? Because as soon as Giannis went down, everybody was very sportsmanlike. Nobody wants to see that. But as soon as the ball got tipped in again, Atlanta went for the throat, right? I mean, they went for the knockout punch immediately, and they caught the Bucks reeling. And this might have been a different game if the Bucks had been up by 13 when Giannis gets hurt, and you've got a little bit of cushion to weather some of that. And yeah, maybe the Hawks jump back into it. Maybe they even take a lead, but you've got some time to play with. You've got that opportunity to weather that storm. And instead, Milwaukee's sins of the past come right back to the present, in more than one way, not only for that game, but that previous Brooklyn series. And I am worried about them beyond just the normal, like, hey, Giannis is out. This is a big deal. He's an MVP guy.
Yeah, Milwaukee's about to get labeled as the softest Eastern Conference champion in a while if they end up sort of backing their way into this. And who knows? I guess at this point we're still waiting on the MRI for Giannis, or at least I haven't seen it. Have you seen it before you came on to record?
I have not. I've been looking for it, and the fact that it's so slow in coming is a little weird.
Yeah, it's not the best. It's not the best if we're just sort of forecasting, but we're not in the business of forecasting because Atlanta, like we mentioned, did not have Trae Young in that game, and Atlanta sort of took advantage of the situation that they were in. They were in that situation, not the injury situation, but the being up at that point of the injury situation because they played great team ball, and they got. More importantly, all of their starters, they got production from. They got production from everybody, essentially, that got on the court for the majority of that game, which is not something to watch.
Well, except for John Collins, who had some early foul trouble, had a rough game offensively, and there again, that's an opportunity Milwaukee you think should have taken advantage of when, like, the guy in the front court matched up with Giannis is not playing well either, right?
Yeah. I'm generalizing a little bit, but 80% of your starters could give you a really good game, and you're not in this kind of defensive series, in the last couple of defensive series. If you could get 4 out of your 5 guys to give you really solid production, you're way ahead of the curve. So the fact that when it got to the opportunity where Giannis hyperextends his knees, he's on the floor, and everyone, as you said, is sort of doing the, well, all right, we hope he's okay. We don't want it to come like this. Let's get him off the court. And let's murder the Bucks. Let's just end this thing. We got a game and a half to go. Quarter and a half to go. Let's get this. And you could tell Milwaukee could not weather any type of storm early because Atlanta was up. Atlanta then went for the kill, and then they were there were no deer to fear in that scenario. They were wounded, quite obviously and literally. And now Milwaukee's going to go back home in a series that's tied 2-2 without a former MVP. You don't know if he's going to be able to play. And, there's a whole bunch of question marks about this team where Atlanta might be in an interesting catbird seat to steal this Eastern Conference championship, earn it, but steal it based on what we thought coming into the playoffs.
Yeah, everything you said is absolutely true, and it's logical, and it's what every single other prognosticator will say because it makes sense. And yet, this year has been so weird. We said the same thing when Kawhi went down for the Clippers, right? The Clippers are in big trouble. They're probably dead. And yet, all of a sudden, then, the Clippers are still alive and kicking. So there is an equal possibility that these Bucks are as soft as we think they are, and Giannis is absence, if there is one, is the death knell for their attempt to get to the finals. But there's also that weird possibility, based on how ridiculous this year has been, that all of a sudden Milwaukee goes home and Drew Holiday drops 35 and Middleton has 40 and the Bucks, win by 25. Like, I don't even know what to say anymore, honestly, with these playoffs. It's weird.
It's been bizarre. It's going to be very odd if like the champion of this conference goes without either their MVP or their brand new superstar, and all of a sudden you have a limping Milwaukee Eastern Conference champion or a Trae Youngless Atlanta Hawks Eastern Conference champion going against what looks like it could be another wounded champion from the West. Let's talk about that game, as that could be the final game for the Kawhi-less Clippers tonight. They're down 3-2. Phenomenal effort from the Clippers and the I guess, at least for now, playoff Paul again.
Yeah. He exists. We know he exists. We just don't see him all the time. But
he's in there somewhere, right? Like we've seen glimpses. Like we've seen him have games like this, and he's going to have to be the guy again to stave off elimination again at home to try to force a Game 7. Joel, I'm just going to hand this off to you and the baton to you. Phoenix has a chance to close it, and they've been pretty good with closing out teams when they've had the opportunity. But Ty Lue's been able to summon up a lot of really good recipes for staving off elimination. He's statistically one of the best coaches in history when his teams are facing elimination or about to eliminate someone else. So, Joel, do you like this to get to a Game 7? You thought before the series this could go 7.
I did think it could go 7. I think I predicted 6 once we knew Kawhi was out completely.
And we're
here. So, and yeah, I'm going to say it's 6. I think the Suns do close this out. Clippers played with tenacity. They got great minutes from DeMarcus Cousins, which was really inspiring to see. It wasn't a lot of minutes, but especially with Ivica Zubac's not in the game, the Clippers had to go small again. That meant Marcus Morris dropped in 22 points, one of his best games of the playoffs, because not only did he help them offensively, but defensively, he holds DeAndre Ayton to 10 points, and Ayton was a minus 22 on the floor overall and was not, this was maybe Ayton's least consequential playoff game that we've seen all postseason.
Oh, I think that's without a doubt. Yeah, and we were just singing his praises in the last podcast about how he's had sort of a really, really nice playoff run.
Reggie Jackson gave them a huge lift, and then Paul George had 41 points. So the Clippers did what they needed to do. We've talked about it before with them, that you can't just have the superstars being the only offensive guys. You need other 20-point scorers to step up, and that is especially true when you're down Kawhi Leonard. So the Clippers got that, but I saw the Clippers aggressively getting to where they wanted to go on offense and continuing to play the same defensive level they've done this entire time, which is very good defense. I didn't see like over the top tenacity defensively. I just thought the Suns lacked kind of that scrambling, scrappy defense early on that we've seen from Atlanta as well, where it kind of comes and goes at times, but when it's there, it makes them a really devastating team because of what they can do on the offensive end. And I know statistically the Suns have been the better defensive team than the Hawks, but I really am looking at those two squads going, there's a lot of similarities between what has made them good all year. You take Trae Young's ability to stretch the floor and get into the paint, and you match that with what Devin Booker does, and you get a lot of rangy wings and then some really savvy veterans and defenses that, again, are not traditionally dominant, but they turn into easy offense. And I just didn't see that out of the Suns, right? You saw them playing like very kind of stock, basic level defense. And in a closeout game, especially when you're at home, not good enough. And Monty Williams talked about that. The Suns talked about that quite a bit. You're right. They've been good in closeout games up to this point. I mean, they would have had to have been because they've closed out twice, right?
Right.
But this will be the toughest one. And heaven forbid you get into a Game 7, because then all of a sudden the veteran nature of the Clippers and the fact that they've just been, like a horror movie monster for teams all postseason, where you get them down 2-0, You get them down 3-1 and they just won't die. Like
Right.
that becomes pretty dangerous for a Suns team that still is young in a lot of ways, despite savvy veterans. So yeah, I think you got to deliver that punch now. I think the Suns can do it because that defensive intensity will push back up. I don't know that the Clippers can hold DeAndre Ayton down for 2 games in a row. I don't think Zubats comes back, in this series, or at least in game 6, maybe for game 7. And the fact that they didn't trust DeMarcus Cousins with bigger minutes and what they were doing. I've yet to see Marcus Morris string together like multiple 20-point games in a row. It's usually an up and down thing with him. So good game by the Clippers on 1, but show me again, because I'm not sure you can do that.
Yeah, it's going to take I think a like an exhaustive effort to do this again. I think for the Clippers, Ayton, even still being minus 22, had a double in that game. I mean, he had 10 and 11. I mean, it's not been as good as we've clearly seen him before this postseason.
He just couldn't get to the basket, right? I mean, he only had 9 attempts. He just didn't seem like he could find pathways for the lob, for the roll. Clippers did a good job of taking those lanes away.
And since the Clippers, remember, they lost their first 3 games this postseason at home against Dallas, but then they won game 7 at home. And since then, they're 5-1 at home. And they've sort of been able to sort of regain. By the way, later in that series against Dallas, and since henceforth, right? So henceforth, whatever. They been able to have more and more fans, by the way, back in LA. So even though it started with only a few fans in that stadium at Staples, they've been able to have more and more, and I think they've sort of fed off of that energy a little bit.
I'm gonna give a low blow on that because it's just too good to pass up. What happened was the Lakers got eliminated. And so Lakers fans started showing up to the Clippers games, and now all of a sudden they're winning at home.
Well, did you see that they're covering up the all the banners and stuff in between because it's not the Lakers gym right now. They don't get to play in it.
Right.
I saw someone on Twitter get really mad because they covered up Kobe's jersey number, and I was like, "What do you want them to do?
Yeah,
they're covering up all Lakers.
It's not their arena. Yeah, that's not their arena anymore. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Sorry, you lost. Too bad. The other
Kobe will understand. He reportedly had a chance to play for the Clippers early on in his career, and turned it down. So,
Paul George had 41 in 41 minutes, and that is just phenomenal effort. Just a phenomenal effort from him to sort of keep his team in it on the road. They played a tremendous game. I don't foresee Paul George having back-to-back even similar efforts. Like I think this sets up for a massive underwhelming performance from Paul George. I think that he's had really good games in this postseason. Like that was one of them, but he's had many games this season. He usually follows up with like a 35% shooting night, and not that he's not trying and he's putting up the shots. It's just they don't go in for whatever reason. Well,
I think it's asking a lot, right? You're asking a lot of guys to be able to step up into these spots, and they can do it. But there is, to me, the feeling of like just staving off the inevitable right now. The Suns are younger, fresher. They're healthier. I mean, let's not discount that. They are healthier, although they were missing Chris Paul early. Chris Paul is still, it seems like, kind of settling back in after returning. I thought it was a mistake last night to put in Abdel Nader, who was suddenly available, and they gave him some minutes. And he gave them valuable minutes during the regular season, but it's been like 3 months. And to me, you don't tinker with that during a playoff series, because it's almost a rule for me. And I'd love to see the stats on this too, but it's a very anecdotal rule that almost always when you have a guy returning from injury and you plug him into either a playoff series or especially like the starting lineup during a regular season, you almost inevitably lose that game because everything's just off. And we saw that even when Chris Paul returned. I don't care if they've been gone a week or a month. It just, to me, that always seems to be the case.
Yeah, since he's been back, he had 15 in that game, and then 18, and then 22 in the most recent loss. I expect another really good effort from Paul. I expect Chris Paul to have a triple-double threatening night this entire night, and I'd be surprised if the Clippers were able to hold on. I think it's a yeoman's effort from Ty Lue and the entire Clippers to be able to make it this far. But like 41 from Chris Paul and 22 from Marcus Morris and 23 from Reggie Jackson, like you can't bank on that every single night. You can't even bank on, I think, like a half of that every single night. You might be able to get one of those type nights from one of those guys, maybe two, but not all three. Those guys haven't been consistent enough to give you that. So that's why I
want to give them respect in regards to, last year we were all bashing them because they were soft, right? They were a paper champion during the regular season, so talented, got into the playoffs, were mentally soft. And this year has been the exact opposite of that. And so you tip your cap to everybody that's there, because they've showed something that when undermanned, they're continuing to fight. And yeah, it's not always perfect. There are some focus issues at times, but it's a much scrappier, tougher team than we saw last year.
Sure, and they've held the Suns to under 100 twice in this series, right at 100 or under 100, like 4 times this series. I mean, this has been a hard-fought series for the Clippers, and they've done, I think, just about everything they can to sort of be in this situation to get to a Game 6. I just think eventually the youth and the freshness is going to be able to catch up. And not just that, but as you mentioned, the health. I mean, everybody except for Devin Booker's face, everybody seems to be sort of, okay now. And it's just, I mean, it's the story of these here playoffs. So, Joel, I think that's going to do it for us. We've got the Phoenix Suns winning their Western Conference championship and going to the NBA Finals yet again. Joel, that is quite the predicament and prediction from you, because we heard it from your lips that you thought the Clippers were going to go. So
I did.
You went with your head, not your heart this time, and that took a lot of guts.
Well, no, Kawhi Leonard getting hurt just change the math on that. So I didn't want to go down with the ship, and yes, that is a Clippers pun. The way that you did with the Nuggets when even after Jamal Murray went down, you were still predicting them to be NBA finalists. But I respect your honor in that, but foolhardy nonetheless.
I don't like at the end of this podcast, you just called me a fool. Didn't like that at all. But,
I said you were hardy as well. I said foolhardy.
Okay. That's supposed to balance it out. Is that what that word does?
Absolutely, yeah. With all due respect, right? Ricky Bobby, with all due respect.
Okay, I see what you're doing. I can read through that, All right, that's going to do it for us. You can check this out on the YouTube, right, Joel?
You can search BbA or Basketball by Association. And of course, if you want the audio only version, you get this podcast wherever you get podcasts. We're everywhere. So do that.
Agreed.